In this episode, we thought we'd have a quick look at IT security myths and misconceptions. And this is the idea of Christian Moan. Thank you very much for this one, Christian. And I know, Christian Lehrer, this is a subject very close to your heart as well. I shall sit in the background and pretend not to be here. Maybe occasional weird comment. Thanks. I was just going to say we all need to wear Justin Bieber t-shirts at the ProAct Sweden gig.
I don't know.
Really, Christian? So over to you, Christian Moan. IT security myths and misconceptions number 1, please.
Yeah, my kind of favorite one is it probably dates my own middle age here in a way, but public Wi-Fi is always insecure.
Oh my God!
Don't use it. Public Wi-Fi is insecure. You'll be hacked if you use it. People will steal your credit card info and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
and I must admit, even I sort of sit in cafes and restaurants thinking, should I connect here?
Mm-hmm.
You know, but this is no longer a thing.
No, I don't think so. Because basically, what used to be the case was that most communication from your laptop or mobile phone or whatever went over the wire or wirelessly in that case, unencrypted, right?
Is that the Wi-Fi? The
Wi-Fi,
Wi-Fi. Yeah, that's
yeah.
Right, yeah.
So basically, back when this myth kind of settled in and everyone started believing in it, most communications weren't encrypted by default, right? So people could eavesdrop, they could captured your packets and see whatever you were doing. But that's no longer the case. I mean, most, if not everything, is encrypted these days from end to end, from your endpoint to the service you're using. Be it email, web browsing, whatever, everything is encrypted via certificates these days. And as a kind of add-on to that, the certificates we're using are also used to validate the source and destination of the packets you're receiving. So man-in-the-middle attacks where you could kind of pretend to be Facebook or whatever doesn't really happen that much anymore, because that would cause an alert on your device that the security certificates doesn't match up.
And this is because encryption used to be very costly from a CPU perspective. So we weren't. Why were we not encrypting stuff back in the day? And the answer is encryption is costly from the point of view of CPU.
It was also costly from a monetary value as well. You had to buy certificates. You have to, and managing certificates isn't easy. Still isn't. It's a nightmare.
Yeah, that's fine.
To be honest. But things like Let's Encrypt, I mean, makes it possible to automatically generate valid certificates matching your domain names and use that for encryption as well as identity or kind of validation of the service itself, which kind of makes the public Wi-Fi thing moot. I mean, everything's encrypted. It doesn't hurt. Feel free to use it. That's kind of my statement there.
So people are going out there and doing nasty things and spoofing. Oh, Christian Lehrer's face. Right, okay, fine. The people out there are doing things like spoofing Facebook and doing man-in-the-middle attacks. But you're saying that they're unlikely to be doing that on a public Wi-Fi network in a cafe. They're more likely to be doing that as a proper industrial thing to your business, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's much harder to do now that everything's encrypted with certificates anyway.
Okay, open the floodgates to Christian Lehrer at this point.
In general, I agree. The attack risk is not that high anymore. But what I think is we might be living in two worlds here. One of them is kind of the corporate world where we are using properly secured, hopefully, services. The endpoints are properly protected. Firewall is turned on and so on and so on. So even if you are in a Wi-Fi which is not properly set up, which has no client-based separation and so on, then your endpoint is still protected, right? If that is not the case, and for example, last year I was on a camp space where this was not the case. I just checked it with my Wi-Fi checker on the mobile phone. I saw the printers, I saw the servers of the system, and so on. So there is still the risk of at least being kind of spied on, data gathering of what you are doing. And let's not forget the DNS configuration also. If you're using a Wi-Fi and you don't have the power over your DNS, normally you get everything via DHCP, you get the DNS server via DHCP. So the provider of the DNS service could, in theory, also see where you are connected. They won't see the traffic itself because that is encrypted. That's true, but they still can gather information. Where are you connecting to? What kind of services are you using to? So just be aware of that. In general, from the kind of importance, it's getting lower and lower, but we're not at 100% yet, unfortunately.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with that. I mean, everyone that sets up a Wi-Fi can look at what people are doing unless they're, in addition, running a VPN over it or whatever. But my point is, using your online bank in a Starbucks isn't the same problem that it was 10, 15 years ago. Because the communication for your to and from your banking system is encrypted anyway. So they can't spoof it. They can't look at what you're actually doing. They can't read your usernames and passwords the same way they could before.
Yeah.
So, of course, everything is based on the situation you're in. I mean, if you're casually browsing the internet on a train in the UK, you're probably fine.
Yeah.
Using the train Wi-Fi. That's my point.
Yeah. No, and I think this is it. There's a difference between being able to see your system, i.e., or see what you're transmitting and receiving, and being able to get some metadata about the fact that you exist and you are there.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah. Exactly. So definitely, I think we can still say there's definitely still going to be some metadata around about the fact that you exist and you are there, or you were there at some point. But maybe, like you say, no ability to be able to track what you're doing within that session.
Of course, if you're sharing out your hard drive from a Windows machine on an unsecured SMB, I mean, people can access your files.
Wow. Okay, that's very generous.
That's not a public Wi-Fi. But my point is, that's not a public Wi-Fi problem. That's a security endpoint problem.
Absolutely true.
Yes.
But there's one easy method where you can test if your Wi-Fi is properly segmented. Just open Spotify and see how many sessions you can join in the Wi-Fi.
Oh, nice.
Easy.
Yeah, nice idea. Yeah, that is good. I was like, Christian Lehrer, what's your IT myth and misconception?
I have one that is actually two, depending on which side you're looking at or you're looking to it. The first one is open source software is always more secure than closed source software. Ooh. And the other side is open source software is always more vulnerable than closed source software. Now, I really want to make people aware that it's not about if it's open, if it's public, if it's closed. People are working on software.
Yeah.
And people make mistakes.
Oopsie.
And I just want to highlight here that there's not that 1 or 0 approach in this. And we see this with everything that came up in the last month. I don't know if you are still aware of the thing that happened around Easter, the XZ thing.
I'm not familiar. Go on. I've been doing all sorts of other stuff.
I mentioned it in our last podcast.
Oh, okay, go on. Okay, no, I didn't know it was called XZ.
You didn't listen, did you?
No, you just recording
I was present.
No, that's basically a very sophisticated attack on an open source product, which is used in basically every Linux distribution, theoretically, right?
Yep.
And how was it possible? Because some single person or a very, very few amount of person is working on the initial library and the initial tool set that is being used. Then there was some malicious person, we don't know how many, that infiltrated.
Let's call it a malicious entity.
Okay.
Ooh, yeah.
Well, I'm thinking it's a ghost.
Yeah, people start naming names, but I won't do right now. Some malicious entity infiltrated the project like years ago to be able to sneak in some kind of malicious code, right? And if that open source software would have been funded right, then other people might have been able to detect that malicious software before being deployed. Right? What I'm trying to tell is, it's not the kind of, is it open source, is it closed source? It's always about how many people have the possibility to work on that thing and to be really able to understand what is happening in that source code, right?
Yeah.
There are bugs in open source. There are bugs in closed source. Open source might make it easier to detect them, but the reality shows most projects are based on 2, maybe 6 shoulders. And the whole internet or half of the internet is relying on those. And those people are getting burned out. And we should do something about that to help there, provide those basic open source tool sets with some money, maybe even. And that's basically it. Just want to make aware of that.
Yeah, okay. It's similar to what happened with Log4j as well, right?
Exactly.
It's an open source thing maintained by a few people. Things happen either by mistake or, as in the XZ compression library thing, it was probably intentional and malicious. It very much looks like it.
Yes.
That was a long con to get that to that point.
Wow.
But yeah, it depends on, as you said, the number of eyes on it and the number of people actually looking at it and doing stuff with it. And that's one of the issues also with open source, as you mentioned. There might be very, very well-used libraries or systems that are maintained by 1 or 2 people. Yeah. And everyone uses them. And then we have a problem.
And not to be anti-capitalistic here or anti-American, even the large companies are using those libraries. They are using the open source stuff and putting it in their own multi-scalar environments and not giving the people the right recognition that they should receive.
No, it's a fair point, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, the other thing it's worth looking at the container security podcast that we did last time out. If you've not heard about this, because we go into it in a little bit more detail. But yeah, there are other products that have been released that are not open source, that are monitoring tools that have been essentially compromised by an external party and then been installed into customer sites as if they are valid, but actually in reality are just giving access to an external third party that shouldn't have access to that data. And that's a closed source product that was compromised. So it's not an open source or a closed source thing. It's a thing.
Thank you. Thanks for that summarization.
Yeah, no, it's good. Right, okay. I'll have a quick go at a small one, but I'll require your support on this, guys, if that's all right. So my one really was something that I hear quite a bit, is the fact that certainly maybe not in very large organizations, because I think very large organizations obviously have the time and the money and the security teams and everything to look after their stuff. But lots of small to medium-sized organizations really rely very much on the software doing everything because they don't have an internal SOC. And that's a security operations team, not something you put on your feet. So the question is antivirus and malware all I need to spot ransomware? So I've got an antivirus / malware piece of software. Is that all I need to spot ransomware? And my sort of feeling on this is that, generally speaking, in small to medium organizations, that's what you rely on. You rely on the fact that, I install this software. It tracks, like Defender that we talked about last time. It tracks file signatures, file hashes, and file names, and understands therefore whether it's malware, and away we go. But actually, the key point really is that a ransomware attacker doesn't necessarily utilize tools that are dodgy. A ransomware attacker, once they make it onto your network and they have some degree of remote access to your network, and they will do by one of your employees maybe clicking on a link or doing something that they maybe shouldn't have done, then they do something called living off the land, whereby they will utilize the tools that you already have on your network. They'll use your PowerShell, they'll use your Java, they'll use your Microsoft management tools, and they'll use exploits that already exist within other software that's on your network, and they'll use that as a way of attacking your environment. So it's not a tool. It's not what's the word? It's not the tools we should be looking for. It's the people. Thoughts?
Agreement,
wow, stunned silence.
Agreement. No, it's you're not done with that. You're not done with an anti-malware product. But there are possibilities. Even within Windows, there are so many security features which most of the, especially smaller companies, don't have turned on, like Credential Guard, which is protecting your password hashes, like controlled folder access, which is a ransomware protection, protecting your system files. And if you configure it, it's not a lot of effort. They will also protect your documents from being mass manipulated, for example. There are a lot of things in there. Microsoft is providing a security baseline without any cost that can be implemented. And then you still have to look for the behavior.
Yeah. Christian?
That's kind of my issue with this is, why isn't all of those things enabled by default?
Yeah, no, got it.
I have an idea for that. Let's talk about enabling things for default, like SMB version 1, turning off SMB version 1 with, I think Windows 10 was the first version who had it off by default. Holy shit, that broke things, because especially the smaller environments are using some kind of NAS systems from vendor XYZ, which is relying on that old thing. And now you have the problems. And that, I think, is a very, very large issue when you are so popular as Microsoft is. You have to somehow maintain that compatibility, because otherwise people will say, oh, my Windows is broken. I have to use a Mac now. Which wouldn't make anything better in this case, but that's the
a bit more expensive.
The conception there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was going at, because if you started today on scratch, on zero, we would be in a much, much better place by the existing default settings.
Yes.
And the existing defaults are the same thing as the public Wi-Fi, right? It used to be a bigger problem than it is.
Yep.
And we've moved on. Right? Yep. And it's the same. If you start now with something from scratch, you have a much, much better possibility to actually secure your stuff, because the defaults now are more sane than they ever were. And I might say that again in 10 years and look back to today and say what we did then was crap. But that's evolution, right? That's how it works. The problem is, and always will be, is the
backward compatibility,
right? And the legacy you carry with you as you move on.
Yeah.
And your technical debt is the biggest issue.
Technical debt. That's a good one.
Yes. I love that term. It really is so fitting for many, many things which have been done like this all the time. Never touch a running system. Everything like that. Technical debt.
Oh, it's like, I'm going to say, it's like trying to change the wheels on your car while it's moving along. It's like virtually impossible to do in a safe and meaningful manner.
Exactly.
So no, I completely agree. But this is why security is a very difficult thing for most organizations to be able to deal with. The thing I was going to recommend with regard to this sort of living off the land protection, this is where sort of SIEM comes into its own, because SIEM doesn't necessarily need to be the world's most expensive product. But what it does is it takes a holistic view of how your network is working, and it scans your logs for your network and your backup tools and your firewalls and your Active Directory and what have you. And it allows you to monitor activity that you're not expecting. And that is exactly what, ransomware attackers are going to be doing by poking around your network looking for things.
Yeah, but to have a SIEM, you have to have people looking for the SIEM, after the SIEM, into the SIEM. So especially the smaller organizations, they most likely won't be able to do it themselves.
No, but you can get SIEM as a service. So it's definitely a thing. But my point is that they're going out and spending loads of money on their antivirus, anti-malware software. They're not doing it they're not writing it themselves. Yeah. They're buying it. But it's definitely something you can still buy. But it increases your level of protection quite a bit.
Exactly.
Yeah. So basically everything isn't as it seems.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay. Can we have a sound of tumbleweed, please?
We need a button.
I'm here till Wednesday. Try the veal. That sort of stuff. Take my wife, please. Take my wife. Anyway,
thing I've heard a lot, which basically isn't true, is we're not interesting enough to be attacked.
Yeah. Oh, especially these days. My word.
My little company isn't interesting. We don't do anything. Or my home computer, personal computer at home, isn't interesting enough. So why should anyone attack me? I'm not interesting. I have nothing to hide. I'm not worried, right?
And that's not true?
Well, okay.
No.
It's got good tasting T-shirts, but a bit, you know.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, and I think that's the misconception, is that people think that companies or individuals that get compromised or attacked are being targeted as the company or as that person. They're not. These things are automatic. So if you have a vulnerability somewhere, someone's going to exploit it. No matter who you are, how small you are, or how big you are. It doesn't matter.
Yep.
True.
If you can be compromised, you will be.
Yeah, and not only that, they don't know you're not big enough until they're in most of the time. They don't know you personally, so they're still going to try and attack you anyway because you've come up on a scanner of some description.
Yeah. You're a possibility.
Yes. No, agreed.
And the easier you make it for them, the more likely you are being the one attacked. Mm-hmm. So that's like the old joke where two people in the Canadian woods are jogging, and then somebody sees a bear, and then they say, "Oh, there's a bear! There's a bear!" And the first one starts running. The first person starts running. And hey, what you doing? Because the other person is just tying his shoelaces again. And the person running says, "Why are you not running? The bear's going to catch you." And the person lacing the shoe says, "I don't have to be faster than the bear. I just have to be faster than you." Okay. That's basically the same is true for IT security. You have to be better than the next one, because the next one is the easier target and attackers will go there first because it's less effort, more money made. That's that easy. Yeah.
Great, guys. I think we probably best call it a day there. But I think there's more in this myths thing. We should spend a bit of time on those in the future as well. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Christian. Lara, nice to have you back. Thank you, Christian Moan. Nice to see you again. And we'll see you at the next one.